Now we move on to our last but not least fireside chat of the day, which is how to win in the B2B SaaS market, lessons learned. Without further ado, I'd like to call on the stage Alexander Bothe, founder of UnicornMaker, Roshan Pathak, SaaS IT Strategy Advisor, angel investor, and board member at Elevation Capital, and Sriram Srinivasan, president of Cloudwareshare. Please come to the stage and give them a round of applause.
These lights are really bright, as most of you know.
We'll do a little more in depth on who we are, and then we'll try and do some knowledge share. Does that sound good? Excellent. So once again, Roshan Pathak, IT Strategy Advisor, SaaS, venture capital, a variety of different venues, but primarily focus on enterprise software implementation and delivery. So that's the angle I'll be coming from.
Yeah, Alex Bothe spent about 10 years in early stage startups, so kind of the opposite end of the spectrum from my co-panelists here. And yeah, do a lot of different work as on the engineering side, hands deep technical, product, marketing, venture capital as well, and just kind of all around. And all of the companies I've worked with have been SaaS products, so should get some good stuff.
Hey, Sri here, president of Cloudwareshare. We are an IT consulting and professional services firm. We come in and enhance and sustain the business, finance, and HR systems. That's what we specialize in: large-scale on-prem ERP and SaaS applications.
So, gentlemen, as we had our brainstorming session prior to this keynote, I think one of the key elements we talked about is how are we going to bastardize the actual title of the topic we're going to talk about. So we're actually going to talk about more of how not to lose, if that makes any sense to those in the crowd here. And so I will kick off with some lessons learned, and I had a very informative chat with one of our other award recognees earlier. We preach the gospel of automation everywhere we go, and oftentimes do not integrate the importance of the human element. For those in attendance yesterday, there is absolutely, unequivocally no doubt that Microsoft's layoff of 10,000 people equates to the performance of their software. And so, first and foremost, where I'd like to start on lessons learned. Whoever the project sponsor is, owns, from a RACI matrix perspective, RACI, who's responsible for what? A, who's accountable for what? C, who should be consulted on the specific delivery aspect? And then finally, those you need to keep informed, which are typically your C-suites and your stakeholders. Nobody builds out a RACI matrix at the inception of the project on who needs to do what. They get so caught up in building sexy Gantt charts to appease their managers, which are nothing but squares and lines with dates that mean just about nothing. So how do we solve this? Because we're a solution-oriented group. Not going to sit here and complain all day, are we? No. I think one of the biggest lessons learned is while your requirements may change throughout the evolution of the life cycle of the project. Criticality on who is testing to ensure that the system meets the minimal viable product, MVP, or in IT terms, your bare bones version, right? And that translates to the metaphor of, let's simplify it. When you first buy your new house, you don't have the marble top on your kitchens. You don't have the new wooding floor upstairs. And so through comprehensive test cases via the iterative plan, this is the most optimal way to at least tackle scope creep and ensure that the requirements are truly met as far as testing is concerned, because a lot of companies are looking at ways to automate these test cases, which is fantastic. But when you start talking about consolidating your ecosystem with ERP, your human capital management services, your payroll, et cetera, then you're talking about a much more complex ecosystem altogether.
Yeah, I would like to take up on a couple of things that you just said. One is misaligned incentives on some of these large SaaS programs. And when we talk about SaaS, we all know that SaaS is different sizes, right? There are some direct to consumers, but we specifically are talking about large B2B SaaS programs and products, and mostly ERP and cloud-related stuff. If you could want to compare the Workdays, the Oracle Clouds, the SAPs of the world. So in such large programs, as Ro, you just mentioned, the misaligned incentives and misaligned expectations, I'd put both these there. To your point about RACI, misaligned expectations, like who takes ownership of what, who runs the program, everything comes down to we all like bottoms-up approach, where we want to get everyone's involvement in such large programs, but sometimes it has to be the top-down approach, from the stakeholder level, to make sure that the whole team and the program and the company is aligned, and it aligns to the vision of the corporate, right, or the company. So that's where some of these problems, originate. And again, what's the lessons learned there? So some of these, these are like early stage stuff that we need to kind of identify. And like Cloudware, for example, where we go to implement these programs, we are typically not at a point to influence a high-level stakeholder, like say the C-suite stuff, but we can be good enablers, right? To let them know how we have done in other places and what entails a successful program for them. After all, they are the ones who are putting in a lot of money and their FTE is there. So, yeah.
Alex, thoughts on your side?
Yeah, on the opposite side, a lot of times I'm fighting against kind of the corporatization and the over planning of projects, because there's a certain point. I think it's really interesting when you're early stage and you're grinding customer by customer 1 to 100, and even though those clients might be huge, a lot of the time, your product should be doing the heavy lifting for you and these kind of types of things. So I see a trend in becoming corporatized and structured too early and losing the advantage that you have as a small, innovative group of people that can use Agile or whatever to really quickly iterate. But then at the same time, you do have to get to a point before it becomes an issue where you're doing your ERPs and you're, that whole type of thing, corporatizing the startup is kind of how I like to put it. So I think the balance is finding when's the moment to transition and not going too early just because you've been in startup your whole life and want to be corporate really badly and be cool.
Well, that's an interesting point you bring up, Alex, and I think it's a great segue. We have a lot of CEOs, founders of a variety of companies in different verticals at different stages. And so let's talk about the so what and just back up a little bit here. So why is this important? Well, outside of the obvious answer that these systems do help you scale, whether it's your run rate, manage your general ledger in a more efficient way, gain efficiencies through your processes overall, let's call a spade a spade. For all the CEOs and founders of your own companies, please raise your hand right now. If you own a company, please raise your hand.
It's a lot.
Okay, for those of you with businesses, feel free to walk out the door if you disagree with the following statement. Your business was up for sale day one.
Nobody left.
Okay, so why are we talking about this? We're preaching the gospel of SaaS because there are several different flavors of the value add to the organization itself, and scale is one of them. However, when prospective investors see that you have somehow ripped the Band-Aid off by implementing one of these larger systems, you're looking at prospective higher valuations on a potential exit. Speaking from past history, I think, unless Sri, Alex, do you have any other further commentary there?
Yeah, I would like to add one point there regarding valuation, right? So to your point about showing a company's value and moving into SaaS product, we could talk a little bit about the CapEx and OpEx stuff, right? So I think the incentive that most of these corporations get to move into SaaS is they are trying to convert their CapEx spending into a OpEx model, wherein they could detect these expenses on a pay-as-you-go model, right? And that's like most CFOs love that, right? And rather than a large CapEx expense, and I believe that plays into the value of the company. I think when it comes up for sale and stuff like that. And I would also like to add one point to what Alex was mentioning about how he's kind of against the big the what do I call it, the hierarchy or tyranny or whatever you can call it. The issues in large SaaS programs is not the way the implementation has to be done or something. It is also partly the people who are involved, because if you look at where these systems or where these people like actually where they worked and where they come from, they were in on-prem ERP, like on large scale ERP systems for a very long time. And when you introduce them to a SaaS concept and they say, hey, you have to do it in an agile, there is no waterfall anymore, it's a lot of change for the people. So I would say, as part of the change management, it's not just the users, the end users of your finance or HR systems or your CRM systems. You may probably want to look at the core members of your IT group to make sure that they are ready for this, right?
So I want to dissect that question. He comes from the world of, we're raising cash, we're going to go bankrupt in X number of months, we have to get live on this solution, and we all come from different spaces, as do here. So I do want to elaborate on that point a little bit because it makes a lot of sense. So
Sure.
Any comment on the approach for a company of 5-10 people where each has to wear 10 hats and may not even be an IT expert but are forced into this? Lessons learned, pain points?
Lesson learned. Well, I don't know how related this is to exactly what we were just talking about, but I mean, pain points, lessons learned. I've had startups that I've either consulted with or worked at or owned where, the executive team spends 2 months of dev dollars building dashboards to figure out what they should make for the product, And what they're evaluating are things that could be coded and delivered to users and just like asked for in, less than a week. So sometimes, and it takes a burden too, to your point on the IT, when you want to transition from, building interesting things, getting user feedback, iteratively like crushing the market, to going to this big kind of planning and data-oriented system where all your resources are budgeted out and there's a lot of red tape on everything, which obviously does have benefits evaluation-wise, pre-IPO, obviously you got to do that. But I come from like the Series A world where you don't want to do that too early, basically.
Yeah. And one thing to add there is, so we are also we also have to look at the company's like TQM, the total quality management, and that type of stuff in large organizations. So as much as we as consulting companies would like to go in and show the results to the client, there are these processes, like they could be a ISO, they could be a CMMI level 5, level 3, and if you're a federal contractor, they have CMMC, which is a new standard. You need to follow all that. So we are all trying to learn, how to insert ourselves into the agile practice in ERP delivery, as well satisfy all these, certifications and all that stuff. That's
Could you elaborate on that point? Educate some of our attendees who may not be familiar with those acronyms.
Sure. ISO is like International Standards Organization. You have different, certifications, different industries and companies get. It's kind of pretty well known. But as part of ISO, your processes need to be at a certain level. Your quality management should be there. You should have reviews. Mid project reviews. And a lot of documentation involved. CMMI is capability maturity model, and for consulting and IT companies, you have different certifications, and once you have it, you are respected in the industry that your company is following all those things, and when you go into larger SaaS markets, pretty much most of your clients do have one or two of these certifications. So as an implementer there, you have to follow their documentation stuff. And CMMC is a growing subject in the federal contracting space. So if you have to do business with a DoD, or other defense sectors within DoD, you must have CMMC. That's going to be a mandate. I'm not sure about the timeline, but that's going to be a mandate. So everything comes with more document. We wanted to move more agile, more product, code to production quick, but then, so these are all exactly balance it.
Yeah, even at one of the startups I'm working with right now, we're trying to get the SARS 2 or SOX 2, I forget the name of it, the HR
SOX
one.
2.
Whatever the HR one is, that one. And, the process of converting over our code to something, and this is about a 70 dev level company, right? Millions of lines of code, converting everything so that it was, handled. And we actually had a SaaS partner with us, Vanta, helping us do that. Took 3 months, and that's all we worked on for 3 months. But we had to if we wanted to release the next product. So I do see the value in it. It's just
and this plays into some of the misaligned expectations part, because when we get into, the way the marketing is done for the SaaS products, be it a small or a medium or large, you could go up and running in the next couple of months. It's true in some cases, I would say, but where the companies operate with a certain framework, if you don't set the expectations right when you go in understanding the current ecosystem and what it takes to take it live, the senior management would still be thinking it's going to be live in 3 months. You go and deliver the bad news. Guess what? It's going to be like 5 more months, Mm-hmm. So that's a big lessons learned. Try to understand the customer better, where they stand, and how good are they in absorbing the processes, the changes that are coming. That all plays into it, because technically speaking, any techie could say, we could do, whatever you see there, whatever you tell me, I could, automate in the code, I could do it. But how to get there, how long it takes, that's where the real challenge is. And these things play into that. So understand your customer better. That's a big lesson learned. So
big time.
Yeah. And I think that's a perfect segue into kind of the demographic of those involved on your delivery team in order to achieve project success when you are doing SaaS. So we've already kind of hammered the point in about the stakeholder engagement. From my seat, having done multiple implementations where we often see challenges are the conversion or translation of what the developments are needed between who's telling our development team those requirements. And often we find that they are not the right people to be communicating with developers. And this is a problem and a challenge that a lot of companies face. How do you define a job title that's somebody with someone who has to have the ability to speak semi-intelligibly to a CPA, help a COO manage shrink if they're a CPG and other KPIs around optimizing their supply chain? They have to speak semi-intelligibly to the chief sales officer. They're probably going to yell the loudest about what they want from the functionality, and more likely than not, the CEO will back them up from a governance standpoint.
Add one more to it, knowing the industry, right? So the challenge that we have most of the time is people who are very good at, like, say, implementing a SaaS for a healthcare customer is not that good when they go to an insurance or a third-party administrator, because the terms are different and the terminologies are different. And as implementers of SaaS, when we go to a place, the client expects that though we do not know the complete business model and knowledge, you are expected to know how the industry works. You know, what are the key, for example, HIPAA in healthcare is very important, right? And in finance, I guess there is a lot of such stuff, right? So that's another challenge too. You know, from a resources perspective, the industry also plays a key part. And most places, one lessons learned that we found was really helpful is, to your point about, you have to be knowledgeable to talk to their accounting team. They also have to be knowledgeable to talk to an operations team. So where we found that like a sweet spot of kind of resources stuff there is, they need to know, I mean, especially in finance sector, they need to know accounting, period, right? I mean, the rest are additional skill set that, you know.
And a point just came to my head, which I think is relevant. And those who are unaware of the intricacies of implementation don't understand that each role has a different rate card as well.
Exactly.
Which infuriates them, and they want a flat rate when you give them their best solution architect for the price of a junior functional consultant.
Exactly. Misaligned expectations again. Right. So.
And once again, back on the startup and product side, a little bit more so, the same problem comes up. Like, part of the reason I provide value to the companies that I work with is just because of my ability to wear the business hat and then come back in and talk to the developers in a clear way, right? So I kind of like that it's an issue for everybody personally, but it's you know, but it's a solvable problem. I mean, there's a lot of new methodologies, post waterfall, post agile. One of the things I wanted to talk about was FAST, which is this new, like, I call it agile on roids, basically, but
to each their own, Alex. There's no judgment here. We're in Las Vegas, so go for it.
Yeah, it's cool because it's built around modern product teams, which I'm sure everybody in the audience is familiar with. But if not, basically you're combining your marketing, your sales, your product, and your tech into extremely small teams that actually function as if they were their own organization. So what you'll have when you talk about stakeholder alignment and all these types of different knowledge bases and ways of communicating that need to be boiled into your SaaS product, well, the easiest way of doing that is, okay, put 2 devs on it, 1 accounting person, 1 salesperson, 1 marketing person, and see what they come up with. So anyway, just a little bit more on that methodology. Basically, you have this huge town hall with everybody that'll maybe be working on this, whatever the new feature is or whatever new vertical you're trying to attack, let's say, as a SaaS company. And everybody kind of, based on their various knowledge, okay, we can build this. Oh, this technical thing would be a crazy innovation. Oh, our customers are already asking for this. Let's work that in here. They become these like vision boards. And then what's really cool is the self-organizing component of it, where now you have these really small, innovative, startup-like teams, even at huge organizations, able to break apart and take one small chunk and really iterate it to a point where it's awesome, and then now you're having 2-day delivery cycles where product gets shipped on ground and your customers already like it because the sales guy was watching you code it, right, in some instances. So it's and it's also a recursive model, so what you do is you take that whole process and then go up a layer if you have another 100 employees and so on. So that might be a nugget of wisdom to take home to your guys' companies if you like. It works. It's pretty cool.
Yep. The safe methodology, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the large scale SaaS ERP group haven't even come out of the shock of agile, and here you are introducing a fast with 2-day delivery. Man, I have to see how that plays out. You know, waiting to see that in action.
Yeah, totally.
Great segue. So let's talk about some successes and wins with tangible reasons as to why they succeeded.
Sure.
Does that sound like a good?
Yeah, I would love to hop in on there. I got some cool stories, but you can go first.
Yeah, sure. I'll take first. So we always have the question about integrating agile into ERP delivery, SaaS, big SaaS products and integration stuff. I would like to talk about a success we had in one of our customers on how that was enabled. As I said earlier, the teams who are working are the key participant here. The management could do any plans. The PM could come up with 1,000-line project management plan. But as long as the team is not aligned to it, you're not getting it. So the way we did it is not the entire team was put into an agile mode, agile delivery. It was we identified portions of the project that could get into agile model while the rest were run in waterfall. It's a little, you have to put it like this.
Like a hybrid model.
Like a hybrid, yes, that's a good term. Yeah, like a hybrid model, and then the success of those smaller teams that went into agile motivated the rest of the group to move into agile. However, I think in typical startup and product world, you would probably get things into production, live to customer can see within like 2 weeks or 2 days and fast, but in large scale SaaS ERP, you may not see that in production in 2 weeks. However, the functionality and the feature is ready to deploy, because we the challenge, we cannot deploy it as we go, but we have to keep it ready. So we are still, kind of, you can call it like a waterfall, but agile, kind of stuff. So, yeah. So that's one success. Going hybrid was good for us. Yeah.
No, that's super interesting, and I kind of want to steal that and see if I can't use it at some of the places that I'm working at.
And Alex, basically try to pick up like the teams and people who are interested in these stuff and put them in first, and it'll sure will work.
Early adopters, the last one, right?
Right. Alex, wins.
Yeah, wins. I can tell a story that's kind of cool. I don't know how, businessy it'll come across, but basically I was working at this one startup that total team was 4 people, and the CEO was gun set on being like an Instagram story. It was a B2B SaaS product, but he wanted the 5 total employees selling the company for $1 billion, right, to Facebook or whatever. So really, really small, and up against, in that particular industry, companies that are basically pre-IPO, like just massive, billions in ARR and all kinds of stuff. And we're dealing with, maybe when I got there, 70 clients, which were small businesses. And something I think that gets overlooked is how simple it is to actually dominate a market when you kind of like peel back the curtain of what your customers actually want and how you can kind of obliterate your competition. So what I did is I was like, hey, this is a really expensive thing to teach our customers about, and that they have a need for it. So let's let our competitors run those ads and YouTube and everything. How do we turn our competitors into our advertisers without them knowing it? So what we ended up doing is building basically a scraper where you could just put in your website, and that was our onboarding was literally one input field, and this is the type of thing where it's going to automate your entire business for, like, let's say a plumber or an electrician. So really complicated system, one input field, which was just your username and password and website from whatever competitor you're on, and then we go in, steal all the data, and it was just beautiful. It 4x'd the clientele in 2 months. It was just crazy.
And data equals dollars. And data equals dollars.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, once we could go to our clients and say, hey, we have this one little feature that you want that's really sick. Yeah, but like that's not enough to make me change because all my stuff's here and downtime. I'm like, just give me your username. You know what I mean? And it's done with. So it makes the marginal, if your onboarding process is like crazy efficient and really good psychology-wise for your users, the amount of like how much better you need to be than your competition to just completely obliterate them is like one feature, as opposed to your argument having to be like, it's night and day. You don't have to spend the dollars to make it night and day if it's easy to switch.
Precisely. I would say throughout my career, the most proud I felt amongst the, tremendous amount of colleagues I've worked with over the year was unequivocally working for UnicornMaker, which is a 1099 contingent labor solution. Think of it as an Uber for large enterprise companies looking for medium to high skilled employees that want to continue working remotely from home, have other life obligations, don't want the 9 to 5. And if you see the trends in the macro environment around the labor movement in the last 2 years, I think you know what we're all talking about here. So what I'll do is I'll explain a little bit about what UnicornMaker does. Managing 1099s is obviously a completely different ballgame from a regulatory and compliance standpoint. Our founder, who is a true visionary, just like Steve Curtis at Elevation Capital, encouraged, at the time, OpenAI to its fullest capacities at that time. But most importantly, I see so many companies searching for capital, albeit working capital or otherwise, and they work so hard to try and perfect the product. To your point earlier, Sri, about, well, what do businesses need? Let's go back. You don't need a Harvard MBA to know that you need customers and you need cash to run a business. So while we got backed by Union Square Capital, Union Square Ventures and Spark Capital with Fred Wilson on the board, we took a product that was arguably beta 2.3 to market, but it didn't matter because we were able to onboard those customers. And looking back now, after the acquisition by ADP, and I'll keep the numbers confidential, but it certainly was a 9-digit exit. What's most interesting to me about that exit and that whole experience about selling the SaaS model as part of ADP's larger human capital play is it's almost, if you go by the numbers, the amount in millions they paid for the data that we had on these proprietary group of people, where we built no recursive modeling, did no predictive analysis, did no artificial intelligence on, we just threw it up into AWS and just had data on these people for 7 years. I wish I could share with you the multiple they paid for that, but unfortunately I'm not at liberty to discuss that. It was quite healthy. And so I have my parents here so I can joke about this. The exit's not going to get me, my house in Boca Raton, but that's a different story. Might get me some more golf clubs that I break because I simply just can't play the game at all. But I digress from the subject matter altogether. I think going through that experience of learning change management processes and the ADP model, which I'm on your side, some meshing there, but at the end of the day, that's one of the biggest successes. And what I will say is those who are pursuing a career either in project management, IT, to a large extent, just be very cognizant that the lessons learned from PMBOK and other project methodologies are not always cookie cutter when it comes to SaaS delivery at all. And Alex, Sri, would you guys like to elaborate on that point before I lose my mind?
No, that's a great point. And as a good consultant answer, it all depends on where you go. You need to structure and tailor the process to the client needs. I also wanted to ask you both a good question, right? I mean, in both these examples that you just gave, the data was a very good friend of yours. You made money with the data. You probably designed a better product and gave more customers and turned money. But is data truly your friend or your enemy in SaaS? I mean, let me preface it a little bit, right? In some cases, in SaaS, sorry, Ro, go ahead.
No.
So
Azure Data Lake and data warehousing, but I don't think we have time to talk about that.
Right. So from one of the pitfalls about SaaS and lessons learned, sometimes data could be your enemy when you are going into a big corporate and trying to do stuff. But as you said, you can never make data your enemy. So try to be friends with the data, right?
Right.
To save you from the pitfall. So.
Because every flavor of acquisition is different. And so I see so many bright minds here. Everybody has a price. And so if the company comes in, meets your terms, they may buy you simply for the data, scrap the IP, and tell you to have a nice life and recommend a nice jet for you.
Yeah, in general, it's just about finding whatever that mode is, right? Whatever that, and it doesn't have to be like a whole product or a whole business. They'll scrap everything. And sometimes it's an algorithm, sometimes it's the data, but I think you can't, like, especially nowadays, execs and with all the AI stuff that we've been talking about, everybody's like data. That's one play. There's hella plays. If you have a better way of talking to your customers, you have a better pipeline, you have, like I said, algorithms, IP, that's dope. Like whatever it is, users, just trust a brand, find something and crush it.
Absolutely, Alex. There are so many ancillary revenue streams in this space. Given the differentiating sectors that you are in, could you educate the crowd on what you're seeing? Because it may be different amongst industries.
In terms of what I'm seeing on what, real quick? I'm sorry? What am I seeing on?
So, what are you seeing as far as some of those ancillary revenue services? Because who are the best customers to sell to? Your existing customers who are comfortable, understand your requirements through the full implementation. And so it takes a heck of a lot for you to switch your vendor after you've committed to them on that one project. That's not necessarily you're committing to them on future roadmap items, but given your fast-paced startup world and obviously your esteemed background, there are so many ancillary revenue services from a product differentiating perspective. And as I'll give you a use case as an example. My partners and I were given the opportunity to compete with Uber Eats in Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, Dominican Republic, and essentially the entire Central American market. Obviously, the total addressable market's nothing close to the United States. However, we invested in the team first. We focused on the drivers, and at our peak hit 4,600 drivers concurrently at one time. We flat rated per drive, and we saw our exit with Delivery Hero last year in a very favorable exit. And so we did a multitude of things. But what we did was we listened to the market. In Dominican Republic, they wanted Ubers for Lamborghinis, Maseratis, Mercedes. And what was so fascinating in the Central American market, they love to physically hold their movie tickets and their concert tickets. And that was one of the bigger product, stages of evolution. But to try and even predict that or scope a project,
Exactly.
right? And so could you speak to some examples where you wanted to achieve B and you found out, oh, C and D are other opportunities to make money?
I'll let Alex go first from a startup world. So from a corporate world first standpoint, right, and especially when you talk about SaaS, the most that we see, that we see cases like this are when you are being called for a finance or a supply chain related stuff, wherein the marketing team sees a value in what you're doing. So within the corporate is where you find your wins, which in fact kind of impacts your customer. So in one example, a very funny example where we were contracted to do their finance and supply chain, but the product that went live first was marketing. The CRM went live first.
Smart.
Which was, so they saw the value on the SaaS product that the customer-facing application should first be done before your internal system. So that's.
So what you're telling the crowd is, with that strategy, you got ROI on the system faster,
yes.
simply because you leverage that singular one.
Yeah, as simple as when your sales reps goes out there to talk to your customer, what use is it if they cannot retrieve a product documentation or specs or some stuff like that, versus a SaaS app where they can go in and like free form field, they type, they get the information, up and available. So.
Yeah. I mean, in startup, a lot of times it's early stage. A lot of it is in terms of finding auxiliary value paths. You put it in terms of pivoting the whole business. So my very first tech startup was like a economics technology platform for musicians. Think like Uber for bands, basically. And as you can imagine, that was a bit of a struggle for a while, but we had a really good relationship with all these bands, and a lot of them actually just wanted to like grow their following on Instagram. So instead of, we were originally focused on like booking venues and generating a revenue stream for them, but very quickly, like they weren't interested in that because the whole model had changed. Like even live concerts, it used to be tickets, right? Like the CDs were where you made your money, and then it was live shows, and now it's all merch. So they were just interested in promoting a following. So I built one of our features was basically like an auto marketing bot that eventually spun out thanks to VC feedback, which is the other side of the company. When you're doing startup, you're actually running two businesses. One makes you a lot more money than the other, I'll tell you that much. But we actually spun out the whole business, scrapped the music thing, and just kept the marketing, and then found different verticals to approach this really like guerrilla following-based marketing approach, and that ended up doing way better for us than trying to like help musicians. So sometimes you got to be open to, I think in the entrepreneurial world, it's a lot about don't fight the current, right? Like LLMs are the talk of the town right now, and yeah, a lot of people don't really understand how they work or what the real use cases are or how they're gonna actually transform our economy. It doesn't really matter, they're all talking about it, so if you can wrap it up in that, like go for it, right? You gotta be wary of what the world's telling you and listen to it and be ready to completely change everything about your company just because that's where the money is, so.
Fascinating. All right, we're approaching our 5-minute time boundary here, and we wanted to make this collaborative. So if there are any questions, we're certainly happy to tee them off. I would certainly like to understand if there's anyone in the crowd currently going through any implementation struggles, looking at large IT SaaS products on their roadmap, and have any questions. If not, we're happy to continue on how to keep winning. Yes.
So, in my experience working very closely with engineers, whenever we're in a tough spot, which sounds
be too loud. Okay. So when I work very closely with engineers to develop a product, right? Obviously, we're working with SaaS software. What seems to work, and I want to get your ideas on this, is what they've called extreme programming. In a virtual world, two engineers sitting together looking at the same screen and debugging and coding together. And there seems to be a lot of synergy and scale here. We would also have this with a broader war room. You have UAT, QA, business compliance, ops, legal. Can you talk a little bit about your experience in deploying something of that nature, or what are your thoughts around it?
It seems more like a startup topic, you know.
We call it pair programming. You may have heard that term as well, versus extreme programming. And haven't had the pleasure of implementing it or being a part of it directly, but one of the people I worked with was a huge believer in it and kind of got us down that path. And the data on it is that it crushes, which is probably why you brought it up. It works. Instead of doing a PR pull review, right, 10 minutes later or an hour later and learning what they're coding and stuff, you're getting it in real time. So the data on it is that it does really well and eliminates a lot of bugs. You can actually get to a point where you're shipping 0 bugs to production, even if your cycles are like 2 days. And a lot of that has to do with getting your QA involved early, understanding, okay, trying to prevent bugs from happening in the first place. So there is a huge value to it. But I will say that on the implementation side, it depends, consulting answer, but it depends on your people. If they're gonna find it like insulting or weird to have somebody over their shoulder, don't do it, but if there's strong relationships within your devs or with cross-functionally, right, you have to look at the human component of it and not just look at it as a system, because that's ultimately gonna determine whether or not you're one of the good statistics or the bad statistics when it comes to implementing something like that.
All right, so I think it depends. I completely agree with you. It depends on not just the people, but the culture of your company. If it's a startup, if you have young kids sitting there like, all right, we can do this, yes, absolutely. But if you backtrack like maybe 10 years, coders like their space. Totally. They want to put their headphones on, they want to be in their jams, they want to tune away the whole world, just code. So to answer your question, it really depends on the culture of your company and the people you have. Now, there was one startup that I helped, and we had the exact same issue, where there was, your 20 to 22-year-olds, and then you had your senior coders. That did not work. So what we ended up doing is creating pods. So microservices type development where each component is its own thing. We had one pod that did exactly what you're doing, and then we had the more senior programmers on the other side saying, all right, put your headphones on, tune out the world, get your stuff done that way. What we've found is, depending on the complexity of what's being developed, the end results are different. And it also depends on your SLA, it depends on how fast you want to get this thing turned around, and what your risk tolerance is to get that thing turned around in production sooner with a higher degree of defects. So
Exactly.
a lot of components come into play. I just wanted to add my 2 cents.
No,
there.
that's totally facts. I'm glad you did. Yeah, theoretically it is, but to his point, you know.
Hey, can I just ask a question since I'm here, unless you have a point you want to make?
Well, certainly just want to kind of piggyback on that point of having a streamlined process, starting with some sort of initial triaging, so those junior QA engineers, you know, essentially ensure that you are merging clean code into production. That's a model for success, certainly, because for those who may or may not be aware, retesting test cases, excuse me, for these large enterprise software solutions are great entry-level jobs for students coming out of college. So they don't know the first damn thing about what the business is doing. They're just yes or no men and women to their managers. And so there's this hybrid model where you see Microsoft incorporate RSAT tools. That's a regression automated tool for specific test cases. If you define them against the development, that's where the time investment you're seeing is to avoid the human error.
The
Depends on
unit
which
tests, integration tests are all like do them.
And I'm already starting to think how to incorporate fast and extreme programming in large-scale SaaS.
They
so
are
that's
the
good ideas.
Yeah.
Well, also depends on which generation you're from. The generation I'm from, we had a motto, and I'm that's from the most interesting man in the world. I don't always test my code, but when I do, it's in production. All right. You know what? I'm going to leave the mic here. I did have a question. I'll follow up with you guys later. I'm going to have someone else.
I think you should drop the mic after that punchline. Boom. Come on.
Come get a chair, bro.
Anyone else with any questions? Is the question how to speed things up in code review?
How pair pro?
Right.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys want to touch on it. But
No, I think that's definitely a part of the delivery, and I think that's where some of these practices that I'm hearing right now, the pair programming and stuff on large-scale SaaS, you know, like I was saying about the hybrid approach for Agile and Waterfall in the same program, we probably have to look at incorporating some of these where peer review is part of it, pair programming is another side of it, whoever is willing to adopt and move faster. So that's a good point. Yeah.
Agreed.
All right. Being the time cop here, we're past our boundary. I hope you all found this informative, semi to moderately fun. And we certainly hope you have a wonderful conference and safe travels back to wherever you came from.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.